It's now been almost 2 months. I flew in last night, flew to Phoenix, and then drove here. A couple of things that I'm going to be looking into this week. It's interesting what Savannah Guthrie said about the back doors being propped open. I think a lot of people assumed that there were sliding glass doors. But when we put our drone back up this morning and really focused in on the back in a way we hadn't before, and it's not sliding glass doors. There are 3 doors in the back that I could see, and they're just regular doors with kind of panel windows. 2 appear to be like near the bedroom and living room, and then there's another door over near the garage. But Savannah said doors plural were propped open, so I would assume it's the doors right near the living room and bedroom there. But it was just kind of interesting to see the backyard.
It was a Friday night in February. In a quiet residential neighborhood near North Swan Road in Tucson, Arizona, the sound came first, sharp, percussive, and final. Then the lights, then the vehicles. Armored units from the Pima County Sheriff's Department rolled out with a massive show of force. NewsNation's senior national correspondent, Brian Entin, was already there, the first member of the media on the scene. He stood yards from the perimeter and watched. What he was watching was the most visible moment in a 13-day search for an 84-year-old grandmother, a woman named Nancy Guthrie, who had been taken from her home in the Catalina foothills and had not been seen since. The operation looked decisive. It looked like an answer. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos later confirmed that authorities were following up on a lead, though no arrests resulted from the raid. But by sunrise, no one was under arrest. The rain was already falling when the armored vehicles turned the corner. It was the evening of Friday, February 13th, 2026. 13 days since Nancy Guthrie had last been seen at her home in the Catalina foothills. 13 days of tips, searches, and silence. And now this. The Pima County Sheriff's Department SWAT unit rolled out in the rain with a massive show of force, descending on a residential block near North Swan Road, approximately 1.9 miles from Nancy Guthrie's house. Bearcat armored vehicles sealed both ends of the street. K-9 units swept the perimeter. Tactical officers in full gear moved toward the front door with practiced precision. NewsNation's senior national correspondent, Brian Entin, the first member of the media on scene, he was there to capture it. 2 people came out. Entin reported that his crew got video of officers walking out with a man and a woman, and that it appeared the 2 people were a mother and her adult son, though that relationship was never officially confirmed by the sheriff's department. They did not resist. They raised no objection. They were placed in zip ties and questioned on sight. No shots, no struggle. Just 2 people on the curb, and dozens of federal and county officers moving through their home. Retired Pima County SWAT commander Bob Krieger, who later reviewed the operation, noted that SWAT members are concerned with taking everyone into custody, doing that safely, and giving the investigators a safe scene to work with. By that measure, Krieger said, the operation went smoothly, but smooth is not the same as conclusive. Sheriff Chris Nanos confirmed that no arrests resulted from the raid and that authorities had been following up on a lead. The 2 individuals were questioned and released. The Bearcats drove away. The tactical teams packed up. The street went quiet again. The force deployed that night is reserved for situations where law enforcement believes there is a credible, dangerous threat. Every step of that process, the threat assessment, the warrant request, the chain of command approval, requires documented justification. And yet by morning, no one was in custody. Why deploy that level of force if you weren't certain? What happened on February 13th was not a single raid. It was a net, cast across multiple locations at the same time by multiple agencies. And just an understanding how that net was built tells you a great deal about how far the investigation had actually come. While the SWAT team was executing the search at the residential address near North Swan Road, a second operation was unfolding less than 2 miles away. A man was detained during a traffic stop at a Culver's restaurant, a fast food location approximately 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home. Sheriff Chris Nanos later confirmed on camera that this man was their person of interest and that he was cooperative. He was released and never charged. No language in any official statement connects him to the abduction itself. 2 locations, 3 people detained, 1 coordinated operation, and it was a federal operation. The Pima County Sheriff's Department confirmed that law enforcement activity was underway at a residence near East Orange Grove Road and North First Avenue, and that because it was a joint investigation, no additional information was available at the FBI's request. That detail matters. A federal search warrant does not happen quickly or casually. It requires investigators to present a sworn affidavit to a federal judge or magistrate, a written document that lays out specific facts and explains in legal terms why this location and these individuals justify a search. A federal judge reviews that document and decides whether the evidence is sufficient. Several FBI vehicles arrived at the scene, and more continued arriving approximately an hour after the initial SWAT teams, according to Entin's live reporting from the ground. The retired FBI Supervisory Special Agent Jason Pack, speaking to Fox News Digital that evening, described the developments as having the hallmarks of agents acting on specific, actionable intelligence. Specific, actionable, federal court approved. Sheriff Nanos said similar operations were likely to occur in the coming days as additional leads arrived at his office. But the person of interest was released. The residents of the home were released. No charges were filed. A federal judge had reviewed the evidence and signed the warrant. If a federal judge signed off, what collapsed between the affidavit and the sunrise? Before the raid, before the traffic stop, before the Bearcats and the zip ties and the federal warrant, there was a glove. And for a brief window of time, that glove looked like the break the entire investigation had been waiting for. To understand why, you need to go back to the footage. After a forensic review of doorbell camera footage, investigators determined that the figure seen on Nancy Guthrie's property appeared to be a man between 5 feet 9 inches and 5 feet 10 inches tall, with an average build, wearing a black 25-liter Ozark Trail Hiker Pack backpack, a model sold exclusively at Walmart. The figure was masked, armed, moving with what multiple retired law enforcement analysts described as calm, deliberate purpose. The video showed an armed individual who appeared to have tampered with the camera at Nancy's front door. This was not someone acting on impulse. Among the roughly 16 gloves collected by investigators in the desert landscape surrounding Nancy's house, most of which belonged to the large search effort itself, one stood out. Found in a field near a road approximately 2 miles from Guthrie's home, it resembled the gloves visible on the figure in the doorbell camera footage. The glove was sent for DNA testing. The FBI received preliminary results and cross-referenced the profile against CODIS, the FBI's national database of genetic records. There was a DNA profile on the glove. It was extractable. The science worked. The result did not. The Pima County Sheriff's Department confirmed there were no DNA hits in CODIS. At this point, there have been no confirmed CODIS matches in this investigation, the department said in a written statement. Investigators kept working. Weeks later, Sheriff Nanos confirmed that the DNA on the glove had been traced to a restaurant employee who worked nearby, a person the sheriff's department said was not considered part of the investigation. The glove that looked like it belonged to the masked figure on Nancy's porch. The glove found in the desert 2 miles from her front door had nothing to do with her disappearance. The early lead had yielded DNA belonging to an unrelated restaurant worker, marking a dead end. The masked figure in the Ozark Trail backpack remained unidentified, unlocated, unnamed. The glove was a ghost. While the SWAT team cleared the residence near North Swan Road, something quieter was happening 2 miles away, in the parking lot of a Culver's fast food restaurant. A grey Range Rover sat under the lights. Not FBI agents and Pima County Sheriff's deputies were photographing, searching, and covering the vehicle. The SUV's trunk was sealed before it was towed away. CNN's producer on the ground watched authorities take photos of the vehicle's interior before the tow truck arrived. Camera crews from local station KGUN-9 captured agents covering the Range Rover with a yellow sheet, blocking the vehicle's contents from public view while they worked. This was not a routine impound. Sources told Fox News Digital that the man detained in the Culver's traffic stop was believed to be the owner of the grey Range Rover. That man, Sheriff Nanos confirmed, was the operations person of interest. He was cooperative. He was released. Retired FBI Supervisory Special Agent Jason Pack told Fox News Digital that a seized vehicle in a federal kidnapping investigation is processed for everything. The developments carried the hallmarks of agents acting on specific, actionable information. In practice, that means fiber transfers, soil comparisons, GPS data pulled from the vehicle's onboard computer, and cell phone records tied to any device that paired with the car's Bluetooth system. A modern SUV does not forget where it has been. Processing that evidence properly takes time, sometimes weeks. An inside source told Arizona's family correspondent Brianna Whitney on February 15th that investigators were still awaiting DNA evidence results from the Range Rover. Those results were never made public. No match was announced. No connection to Nancy Guthrie's home was confirmed. No statement linking the vehicle to the events of February 1st was ever released by the Pima County Sheriff's Department or the FBI. The Range Rover was towed into a federal investigation and quietly disappeared from the public record. The Sheriff's Department maintained that because it was a joint investigation, at the FBI's request, no additional information was available. That may be standard procedure. It may be the silence of a laboratory still working, or it may be the silence of a lead that went the same direction as the glove, and that silence was louder than the flashbangs. 23 days. That is how long the family waited before they went public with the number that would change everything about this investigation and complicate it in ways no one fully anticipated. On February 24, 2026, Savannah Guthrie posted a video on Instagram announcing that her family was offering a reward of up to $1 million for the recovery of her mother. She was wearing yellow, a color that had quietly become a symbol of hope for Nancy's return. The words she spoke that morning were careful, measured, and in places almost unbearable to hear. "We still believe that she can come home. Hope against hope," she said. "We are blowing on the embers of hope. We also know that she may be lost. She may already be gone." She did not stop there. She may have already gone home to the Lord that she loves," she added, a faith-filled acknowledgement from a daughter who was holding two truths at the same time, that her mother might still be found and that she might not. The reward carried something beyond the dollar figure. Savannah announced that the family would also be donating $500,000 to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. In the middle of her own family's crisis, she was reaching toward every other family living the same silence. The response was immediate. Within the first 12 hours after the Instagram post went up, a senior law enforcement official told NBC News that more than 750 calls came into the FBI's tip line. But former FBI Supervisory Special Agent Jason Pack, who had been following the case closely, offered a measured read on what that number actually meant. Pack said the reward suggested a strategic pivot, noting that there are some people who were close to what happened, that know what happened, that now have a decision to make. 750 calls in 12 hours. That is not a manageable number. That is a flood. The Guthrie family had been prepared to offer a reward from the beginning of the investigation, but were advised that doing so might overwhelm the infrastructure set up to field leads. The family decided to offer the reward after careful consultation and coordination with law enforcement. They waited as long as they could. Then they opened the door. Rewards bring answers, but they also bring noise. While the reward was pulling the case into the public's hands, investigators were quietly dealing with a detail that had been unsettling them since the very first night. The camera. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos initially said that the Google Nest camera attached to Nancy's door had been disconnected at 1:47 a.m. on the night she disappeared. While the camera's software detected motion minutes later, no footage was preserved, he said, in part because Nancy did not have an active subscription to the video storage service. Think about that for a moment. The person seen on that doorbell footage, masked, gloved, armed, attempted to tamper with the camera by tapping it lightly, and when that did not work, used foliage from a nearby potted plant to cover the lens. The camera was not ripped from the wall. It was not smashed. It was managed, quietly, methodically, in the dark. The official timeline, confirmed by the Pima County Sheriff's Department and Fox News Digital's verified reporting, places the camera disconnection at exactly 1:47 a.m. Motion was detected again at 2:12 a.m. Nancy's pacemaker disconnected from her phone application at 2:28 a.m. That is a 41-minute window from the time the camera went dark to the last known signal from Nancy's own body. Former Pinal County Sheriff Mark Lamb, reviewing the footage for Fox 10, noted that the behavior visible on camera raises a pointed question. One of my questions is, you see the video when he's trying to cover up the camera when he first comes there. But then somewhere he takes the camera, Lamb said, flagging that shift in behavior as significant. Taking the camera is not improvised. It is deliberate. It is the act of someone thinking about what the camera records, not just during, but after. Meanwhile, retired Pima County SWAT Commander Bob Krieger walked Brian Entin through the geography surrounding Nancy's home and provided context that rarely makes headlines. Tucson is surrounded by mountains in each direction, and once you get on, essentially, the backside of any of those, that's where the remoteness starts, Krieger explained. He added, some of the roads when I used to work out here, they were like superhighways for criminal activity. In this little track here will take you 100 miles south and get you to Mexico if you want. Krieger was describing terrain, the physical reality of the landscape surrounding the search zone. 100 miles of back roads, mountains on every side, a corridor that stretches far beyond the reach of a 2-mile residential raid. A Ring camera, 2.5 miles from Nancy's home, captured a car passing at around 2:30 a.m. on February 1st, roughly the time investigators believe she was taken. Investigators reviewed hundreds of hours of surveillance footage, but had not, as of late February, associated any specific vehicle with the abduction. The SWAT raid on February 13th targeted a residence 2 miles away. It was fast, loud, and visible. The terrain Krieger described, the back roads, the mountains, and the 100-mile corridor south, is the opposite of all those things. 2 theories, 2 directions, 1 case. Was the raid chasing proximity, while the real trail was already stretching south? When the flashbangs went quiet and the armored vehicles drove away, the investigation did not stop. It shifted. It moved from the street to the laboratory. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos confirmed that mixed DNA had been recovered from Nancy Guthrie's home. Mixed DNA is a forensic sample that contains genetic material from more than one person. Some of that DNA, Nanos said, did not belong to Nancy, her family, or anyone who had worked at the residence. That is the detail the entire investigation pivots on: someone else's DNA inside her home. We believe that we may have some DNA there that may be our suspect, Nanos said, but we won't know that until that DNA is separated, sorted out, maybe admitted to CODIS, maybe through genetic genealogy. But then days later, he disclosed that the private lab in Florida processing the evidence had reported challenges. Our lab tells us that there's challenges with it, he said. Forensic expert Barbara Ray Venter, the genetic genealogist who helped identify the Golden State Killer in 2018, explained publicly what that kind of challenge usually means. When a DNA sample is heavily mixed, the suspect may need to be the dominant contributor for the profile to be usable. If the sample is 90% the victim's DNA and only 10% someone else's, that may not be enough for the lab to build a workable profile. C.C. Moore, who's the chief genetic genealogist at Parabon Nanolabs and one of the most respected names in the field, appeared on Brian Entin Investigates to walk through what comes next. She said investigators needed new technology to handle complex DNA mixtures, and that a company planning to release new mixture deconvolution software had likely accelerated that release because of this case. Nancy's case is certainly the one that is making this a top priority, Moore said. It is important to note that Moore said she suspects that acceleration has happened. She did not confirm it as fact. Emmanuel Katranakis, a former deputy chief with the New York Police Department, who spent 25 years in the NYPD's Forensics Investigations Division, described investigative genetic genealogy as essentially the final tool available after traditional databases produce no match. If this perpetrator has a relative that is a convicted offender in the database, you build a family tree around it, he said. The process has worked before. It identified Brian Koberger in the University of Idaho murders. It ended a 40-year search for the Golden State Killer. ASU forensics professor April Stonehouse confirmed that IgG is a reliable method that could definitely advance the Guthrie investigation if there is sufficient DNA from the perpetrator to conduct the necessary sequencing. That last clause is the entire problem. If the raid produced no arrests, the glove led nowhere. The Range Rover went silent, and now the most promising thread in the investigation, the stranger's DNA left inside Nancy Guthrie's home, is sitting in a Florida laboratory, waiting on technology that may not yet exist in its final form. The spectacle is over. What remains is science, patience, and time. The one thing an 84-year-old woman with a pacemaker and daily medication has the least of. On the night of February 13, 2026, Brian Entin stood in the rain on a residential street in Tucson, Arizona, and watched what looked like certainty. Armored vehicles, tactical officers, K-9 units, a federal search warrant signed by a judge, 3 people detained, a Range Rover covered with a yellow sheet and towed away in the dark. Every element of that scene communicated one thing: we have them. By morning, Sheriff Chris Nanos confirmed that no arrests had been made. They had been working off a lead. The people detained were released. The street reopened. The neighborhood went back to whatever quiet it could find. What Entin saw that night was not a breakthrough. It was a pressure valve releasing. The visible output of an investigation that had been carrying the weight of a nation's attention for nearly 2 weeks with very little to show for it publicly. As of April 12, 2026, more than 70 days since Nancy Guthrie was last seen, the investigation remains active, but without arrests, named suspects, or a confirmed location. The FBI has shifted its command from Tucson to Phoenix. The Sheriff's Department has refocused resources specifically to detectives assigned to the case. Nancy's home has been returned to her family, was with no trespassing signs posted on the property. The flashbangs were the loudest moment in this investigation. They were also, in the end, among the least informative. What remains? The mixed DNA in a Florida lab, the masked figure on a doorbell camera, the 41-minute window between darkness and silence does not announce itself with armored vehicles or tactical gear. It works in the slow, careful language of chemistry and genealogy and time. We miss our mom with every breath, and we cannot be in peace until she is home. The Guthrie family wrote in a public statement, "We cannot grieve, we can only ache and wonder." That line does not belong to a news cycle. It belongs to every family that has ever been asked to wait for answers that have not come. Nancy Guthrie has not been found. The investigation continues. In Tucson, at the loudest night of the investigation ended in the quietest kind of doubt.